Number 1. Pierce Pond Wilderness. Pierce Pond, Maine, sits deep in the quiet country north of Caratunk, where the Appalachian Trail slips past mossy banks, cold water, and the old lean-to by the shore. By day, it feels peaceful, almost hidden from the rest of the world. Hikers stop to rest. Fishers watch the water. And the forest seems to breathe slowly around them, mile after mile. But after dark, the pond changes. The trees close in, the water turns black, and even small sounds travel too far. Trail stories tell of campers seeing a tall shadow near the edge of the lake, not walking exactly, but standing between the trunks, as if it had been waiting there before the tents were pitched. No one agrees on a face or a voice. Some say it appears only for a few seconds. Others remember the feeling more than the shape, a sudden panic, a heavy silence, and the strange sense that something unseen has stepped too close. In a place with no town lights and few easy roads out, the mind can make darkness powerful. But fear can feel real enough to send people packing before first light. It is not a loud, haunted place with screams or chains. It is a lonely stretch of Maine wilderness where the trail, the water, and the night meet in one dark mirror. And when a camper sees movement near the trees, breakfast cannot come soon enough because daylight feels like rescue and the pond goes quiet again. Number 2. Glastonbury Mountain and the Bennington Triangle. Glastonbury Mountain, Vermont, rises over a wilderness. The Long Trail and Appalachian Trail cross lonely ridges here, where abandoned logging roads fade into spruce and stone. In the 1940s, that rough country became tied to a string of disappearances that never settled. The first famous case came in November 1945, when 74-year-old Mitty Rivers, an experienced hunter and guide, vanished near the mountain in cold November woods. Searchers knew he was not a careless wanderer, which made the silence worse. Months later, only a handkerchief was reported found, and the woods seemed to have closed around the rest of him. Then, on December 1st, 1946, Bennington College student Paula Weldon left for a hike wearing a bright red jacket. Witnesses saw the 18-year-old near the Long Trail, but after that, the trail gave nothing back. Students, police, volunteers, and soldiers searched for days, yet no clear clue explained where she went before the weather fell or why no trace stayed. More cases followed, and writer Joseph Citro later helped give the region its haunted nickname. Still, the mystery is not just monsters or fog. It is the colder thought that real people stepped into a known landscape and became impossible to find. On Glastonbury Mountain, every bend in the trail feels like it might be hiding one more unfinished answer. Number 3. The Lemon Squeezer and Claudia Smith Caves. In Harriman State Park, New York, the Appalachian Trail does something strange. It squeezes hikers between two walls of rock. The Lemon Squeezer is not a grand ruin or a haunted house. It is a narrow stone crack where backpacks scrape, boots slip, and even confident walkers suddenly feel the mountain pressing in from both sides with every careful step. Not far away, The woods hold another name from the Revolution, Claudius Smith, born in 1736. During the war, Smith and his Cowboys of the Ramapos raided the region as loyalist outlaws, stealing livestock and goods from local farms near the old road. His rocky den became part shelter, part fortress, and part warning to anyone traveling after dark. Smith was captured and hanged in Goshen in January 1779, but the caves kept his story alive. Folklore says stolen loot may still be hidden somewhere in the Ramapo Hills, tucked behind stone ledges or buried beneath leaves. Hikers who step into those shadowed hollows can almost hear boots moving, where no trail should be, in the narrow dark, just beyond sight. First, the trail traps you inside the lemon squeezer. Then the history beside it whispers of raids, fear, and a bandit who knew these hills better than the law. By the time the rocks open again, the forest no longer feels empty. Number 4. Dead Woman's Hollow. Dead Woman's Hollow, Pennsylvania. In the early 1900s, the farms and wooded hollows near Pine Grove Furnace were crossed by footpaths, wagon tracks, and springs where families still drew water. A simple errand could turn dangerous fast in that quiet country before the roads improved. The common local story points to 1908, when a woman went toward a spring and never made it home while daylight faded. Some versions say she became lost in the hollow. Others say a rattlesnake bit her while she was carrying water. Either way, the place took her name, and the words "dead woman" stayed on maps, road signs, and in hikers' mouths. Over time, grief became folklore. Trail stories speak of a woman in a white dress seen between the trees, moving slowly through the low ground as if still searching for the path out. There is no need to make the tale too wild. The narrow valley, the damp air, and the old name already do enough work after sunset, when every branch looks alive. What haunts Dead Woman's Hollow is not just a figure in white. It is the memory of how quickly the Appalachian woods could turn against ordinary people who lived beside them. One missed step, one snake, one wrong turn, and a family story became a place name. The hollow still feels like it remembers her under old leaves, even when the trail is empty. Number 5. Turner's Gap and South Mountain. Turner's Gap, Maryland, is not only a mountain pass, it is a place where the Appalachian Trail crosses land marked by war, old roads, and stories carried from one generation to the next. On September 14, 1862, the Battle of South Mountain raged across Turner's, Fox's, and Crampton's Gaps, just days before Antietam changed the war. Soldiers fought on steep slopes through smoke, stone walls, and timber. The South Mountain Inn and the old National Road sat near the center of that movement, watching armies push through the pass. Maryland later preserved this ground as a state battlefield, and today hikers step over quiet soil where the past is close enough to feel under the leaves. Then comes the stranger legend of the Snarly Yow, a huge black dog said to haunt South Mountain and nearby roads beneath the old trees. Old tales describe glowing eyes, heavy paws, and a shape that appears without warning along the dark ridge. A hunter fires, a traveler throws a stone, and the object passes through as if the beast were made of smoke instead of flesh. First there is real history, written in blood and road dust. Then there is folklore, padding silently beside it like a shadow with teeth near the stone walls. When the wind moves through the trees after dark, the battlefield no longer feels finished. It feels as if something still guards the pass with no sound at all. Number 6. Corbin Cabin. Corbin Cabin sits in Nicholson Hollow, Virginia, a steep green fold of what is now Shenandoah National Park. George T. Corbin built the chestnut log home around 1910, before Park Roads and Skyline Drive changed the mountains. Back then, families still farmed the hollows, raised children, hunted, and lived close to weather, work, and old silence each day. The cabin's saddest story came in 1924, when George's wife Bertie died there in childbirth during a hard mountain year. That one fact gives the old room its weight. Later, in the 1930s, mountain families were forced out as Shenandoah National Park was created. Corbin left in 1938, and the home became a lonely shelter where real life had once burned warm. Today, hikers can still rent the primitive cabin through the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club. There is no soft hotel comfort inside, only wood, stone, darkness, and the sound of the hollow pressing against the walls. Some visitors tell of footsteps crossing the plank floor after everyone is still, or a pale figure moving between the trees at dusk there. What makes Corbin Cabin linger in the mind is that the ghost story rests on real loss. This was not a stage built to scare travelers. It was a home, then a memory, then a shelter for strangers passing through. At night, when the fire drops low, it can feel like the hollow has kept every sound ever made inside that cabin, waiting in the dark around you. Number 7. Bluff Mountain. Bluff Mountain, Virginia, looks peaceful from the Appalachian Trail, but near its summit stands a small memorial that stops hikers cold. It remembers Oddie Klein Powell, a little boy from Amherst County who was not yet 5. On November 9th, 1891, he left his one-room schoolhouse with other children to gather firewood and never came back to the classroom. Rain and ice moved into the mountains that evening. Neighbors searched the woods, calling his name through the cold, but no one believed a child so small could climb all the way to the top of Bluff Mountain. Days became weeks. Then winter covered the ridges. His family waited for news that never came, and the mountain kept its awful silence below them. In April 1892, hunters found Oddie's body near the summit, about 7 miles from the school. A doctor believed he likely died from exposure the first night, after walking farther than anyone thought possible. Later, a lookout tower, then the Appalachian Trail, brought more visitors to the spot, and the story became part of the mountain itself forever. Hikers near Punchbowl Shelter sometimes speak of a small boy seen in the trees, playful for a moment, then gone when approached. Maybe it is only grief tied to a lonely ridge. But when fog lifts at dusk around the memorial, it is easy to imagine tiny footsteps still trying to find the way home before the weather turns again over Bluff Mountain in silence. Number 8. Roan Mountain. Roan Mountain rises along the North Carolina and Tennessee line, where the Appalachian Trail crosses high balds, spruce fir forest, and rhododendron thickets that burst pink in June. The ridge reaches above 6,000 feet, and on clear days, it feels open to the whole world. But when clouds crawl in, the mountain becomes a room of wind and shadow at blue dusk. For generations, visitors have told of the phantom choir. The sound does not come like a single howl. It comes in waves, almost musical, as if distant voices are singing somewhere beyond the fog. Some hear it as angels, some as spirits, and some simply stop walking because the tune seems to move with them across the open grass and vanishing trail below. Old explanations are almost as strange as the legend. Scientists and skeptics have pointed to hard wind rushing over rock, through spruce branches, and across the bald ridges. Others have suggested friction and static electricity in stormy weather. Yet even a natural sound can feel supernatural when it rises from mist, with no visible source nearby now. That is why Roan Mountain keeps its mystery. It offers beauty, first, flowers, wide views, and rolling green shoulders. Then, without warning, the air begins to sing, whether it is weather, memory, or something older than the trail. Hikers understand the story once they hear the wind turn into voices over the ridge and fade into the clouds above again. Number 9. Grandfather Mountain State Park. Grandfather Mountain, North Carolina, rises above the high country with cliffs, ladders, cables, and sudden weather that can humble even strong hikers. The state park was authorized in 2009, but the mountain's fame is older. Since 1952, the mile-high swinging bridge has carried visitors into views that seem to hang in the sky, swaying in cold mountain wind. Yet the backcountry trails have their own quieter legend. Hikers tell of an older bearded man moving fast along the path, dressed not like a modern visitor, but like someone from another time. His canvas pack, rough clothes, old boots, and walking stick make him look as if he stepped out of a faded photograph and onto the trail at twilight alone, too. He does not ask for help. He does not answer greetings. He simply passes by, steady and silent, then disappears when hikers turn to look again. Some think he is the spirit of a mountain man or a lost explorer. Others blame fog, tired eyes, and the strange way steep trails can hide a person behind rock in seconds on a ridge above the clouds nearby now. What stays with people is the feeling he leaves behind. Grandfather Mountain already looks like an ancient face in stone, watching storms roll over the blue ridge. When a lone figure vanishes on that wild ground, the mountain seems to take him back into itself, and the trail feels older, colder, and much less empty than before at dusk. Number 10. Moon-eyed people. The Great Smoky Mountains rise on the Tennessee and North Carolina border, wrapped in blue haze that gave the range its famous name. Long before the national park was created in 1934, this was Cherokee homeland, crossed by old paths, hunting grounds, villages, and sacred places. The mountains held history before they held tourist roads and cabins at all. One of the strangest stories tied to the southern Appalachians is the tale of the moon-eyed people. Early writers in the late 1700s and 1800s repeated a tradition about a small, pale group who could not see well in daylight. Some versions say they lived in caves or old stone places and moved best after the sun went down, under cover of night there quietly. The story has many problems, and that is part of the mystery. Historians disagree over how much of it truly came from Cherokee oral tradition and how much was changed by later writers. Some tried to connect the moon-eyed people to ancient ruins or even lost Europeans. But those claims remain unproven, more legend than settled history even today. Still, the legend fits the Smokies because the mountains are built from shadows. At dusk, every hollow looks deeper, and every rock wall seems older than memory. Whether the moon-eyed people were folklore, their name keeps moving through the dark ridges like a whisper. Number 11. The Brown Mountain Lights. Brown Mountain, North Carolina, is best seen from overlooks near Linville Gorge, where the ridges stack into blue shadow. Since at least 1910, people have watched small lights appear around the mountain after dark. They glow yellow, white, or reddish, drifting low over the valley, then blinking out before anyone can chase them. Folklore gives the lights a sorrowful voice. One popular tale says they are lanterns or spirits searching for loved ones lost long ago in a battle between Cherokee and Catawba people. Other stories make them travelers who never found the road home. The details change, but the image stays the same. A light moving with purpose through the dark, still searching. In 1922, U.S. Geological Survey scientist George Mansfield studied the reports with maps and instruments. He concluded many sightings could be explained by train lights, automobile headlights, station lights, or brush fires seen from far away through mountain air. Even the National Park Service notes that studies point to ordinary causes. Maybe the mystery is not only what the lights are, but why people keep watching for them. On a black ridge, a distant headlight can look like a soul. When one tiny glow rises, fades, and returns, Brown Mountain feels less like a solved case and more like a place still calling names across the valley at night, softly, again and again, once more. Number 12. Camp Michaud. Camp Michaud hides in the forest near Pine Grove Furnace, Pennsylvania, where hikers can still find old foundations, mossy concrete, and broken traces of roads behind green brush. The land had many lives before it became one secret. It was farm country, then part of the old Iron Region, and in 1933, it became a civilian conservation corps camp for young workers. World War II changed everything. In 1943, the U.S. Army turned the former CCC site into the Pine Grove Furnace Prisoner of War interrogation camp. German prisoners, and later some Japanese prisoners, were brought here to be questioned and sorted. The camp was remote enough for secrecy, but close enough to Washington and military offices to matter. The work was quiet, careful, and hidden from ordinary eyes. Prisoners stayed only briefly, sometimes days or weeks. while officers decided whether they had information worth sending to larger intelligence centers. After the war ended, the place became a church youth camp called Camp Michaud, with children sleeping near buildings once guarded by soldiers. They are not just abandoned stones in the woods. They are layers of American life stacked together. Farm, iron land, sea camp, wartime secret, summer camp, silence. When leaves blow across the old concrete, it feels like the forest is covering a story it was never supposed to tell out loud, even now. Number 13. Elkmont Ghost Town. Elkmont, Tennessee, sits inside Great Smoky Mountains National Park, but it was once a busy town, instead of a quiet historic district. In 1908, the Little River Lumber Company and Railroad built a company town here. By 1918, more than 1,500 people lived around the tracks, store, church, school, hotel, shops, and worker homes, all pressed close to the river. When the lumber was gone, the rails were pulled up in 1925, but Elkmont did not disappear right away. Wealthy Knoxville families had already built summer cabins nearby in the Appalachian Club and Wonderland Club. They came for cool air, dances, porches, and mountain weekends, turning part of the old logging world into a rustic resort. Then the national park changed the future again. Many owners sold their properties with lease agreements, and most leases ended in 1992, with the last ones ending in 2001. Cabins emptied, roofs sagged, vines climbed the porches, and people began calling Elkmont a ghost town. Some buildings were later preserved, but the lonely feeling stayed there. The haunting here is softer than a scream. It is the feeling of a town that had too many endings. First the logging camp, then the resort, then the last families driving away. In the mist, an empty porch can look almost occupied. Elkmont does not need to invent ghosts. It already has footsteps made from memory in every cabin wall and weed-covered lane, waiting still. Number 14. Fuller Lake. Fuller Lake, Pennsylvania, looks small and pleasant beside Pine Grove Furnace, but it began as a deep wound in the ground. In the 1800s, the Pine Grove Iron Works used this pit as its main iron ore quarry. Men worked the hole while pumps fought groundwater, trying to keep the mine dry enough for labor below in long, cold hours, day after day. By the mid-1890s, slowly, the ore work ended and the quarry was allowed to fill. The pit was about 90 feet deep by then, which explains why the lake can feel so cold. It was named for Jackson Fuller, one of the last owners of Pine Grove Furnace when iron making stopped in 1895. A working scar became a quiet swimming lake for summer visitors. Then came the oddest legend on this list. Local festival tradition tells of the hairy hand reaching from the water after a lost lunch pail, sometimes with a piece of pumpkin pie in the story. Historians point out that the funny tale is not true, though real accidents did happen at the quarry. That strange mix of truth and silliness makes it memorable. The iron industry left the hole, water filled it, and families later gave the cold depths a monster with a sweet tooth. When ripples touch the shore at dusk, it is easy to smile at the old pumpkin pie story, Then remember that under the calm surface lies a quarry where men once worked in danger and darkness. Number 15. Gathland State Park. Gathland State Park sits at Crampton's Gap on South Mountain, Maryland, where the Appalachian Trail passes through a place marked by war and strange architecture. On September 14th, 1862, this ridge saw part of the Battle of South Mountain, a hard, bitter fight that came just before Antietam and shook the old farms below with cannon smoke. After the Civil War, journalist George Alfred Townsend bought land here in 1884. He wrote under the pen name Gath and built an unusual mountain estate called Gapland. He filled it with stone buildings, towers, arches, and symbols, as if he wanted the mountain itself to remember writers, war, and his own name long after he was gone from the ridge. His most famous structure, the War Correspondence Memorial Arch, was completed in 1896 to honor reporters and artists who covered war. But the eeriest feature is the empty mausoleum Townsend built for himself in 1895. He planned to rest there, yet when he died in 1914, he was buried elsewhere, leaving the cold tomb open and unused in the Maryland woods. That is the quiet mystery of Gathland. It is not only a battlefield, not only an estate, and not only a park. It is a monument made by a man who tried to write himself into stone. When hikers pass the arch and glance into the empty tomb, the place feels like a final sentence with the last word missing. Number 16. Unaka Mountain. Unaka Mountain, Tennessee, rises inside the Cherokee National Forest, where the Appalachian Trail crosses high spruce woods, dark ridges, and sudden openings of sky. The U.S. Forest Service lists peaks from about 3,100 to 5,200 feet, with remote backcountry balds and the Nolichucky River below. This land also carries a much older story. The forest is named for the Cherokee people, who lived, hunted, traded, and moved through these mountains for centuries, before park maps and trail signs existed. In that setting, it is easy to understand why later hikers heard the old woods as more than scenery. The mountain feels guarded, especially when fog fills the spruce. Modern trail lore adds stranger whispers. Campers have reported heavy steps outside tents, cracks in the brush, and the feeling of something large moving just beyond the firelight. Some connect these stories to Bigfoot sightings across Appalachia. Others say the mountain's darkness, wind, and animal sounds are enough to build a monster in the mind after midnight. It is real wilderness first, full of Cherokee memory, deep forest, and lonely miles. Then night comes, and the facts become shadows. A hiker may not see anything at all, but when the spruce goes silent and one branch snaps too slowly in the dark, Unaka feels less like a mountain to cross and more like a place asking to be respected. Number 17. Lewis Rocks. Lewis Rocks, Pennsylvania, stands about half a mile off the Appalachian Trail, a rough outcrop of stone where a person could hide, watch, and vanish into timber. The place is tied to David Robert Lewis, one of Pennsylvania's most famous early outlaws, whose story grew so large that fact and campfire legend now share the same trail. Lewis was born in 1790 and became known for theft, escapes, and a reputation as a frontier Robin Hood. Some accounts say he robbed the wealthy and helped poorer neighbors. Others warn that later storytellers softened a dangerous criminal into a hero. Either way, by the 1810s and 1820s, his name carried through taverns, valleys, jails, and mountain roads. The rocks fit the legend perfectly. Hidden ledges, broken boulders, and forest cover made them easy to imagine as an outlaw lookout or secret camp. Stories say Lewis used places like this to evade the law, and that stolen coins or gold may still be buried somewhere in the hills. No treasure has proved the tale, but the possibility keeps the rocks alive. So Lewis Rocks does not feel haunted by a ghost as much as by a chase. You can picture a man breathing hard behind stone, listening for horses below, choosing between escape and capture. The forest has swallowed the footsteps, but not the name. And when the trail wind moves through the leaves, it sounds almost like someone still running from the law, somewhere unseen. Number 18. Roaring Fork Motor Nature Trail. Roaring Fork Motor Nature Trail winds above Gatlinburg, Tennessee, through one of the lushest corners of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The National Park Service says the one-way road follows a mountain stream whose name comes from the loud rush of water. Old cabins, stone walls, and quiet pull-offs remind visitors that families once lived here. The best-known ghost story is Lucy of Roaring Fork. In most versions, she was a young woman from the early 1900s who died when her family cabin burned. One winter night, a rider is said to have found her walking barefoot in the cold. He offered her a ride home, warmed by kindness, and later returned to ask her family if he could see her again. That is when the tale turns. Her parents, grieving and confused, tell him Lucy is already dead. Some versions say she appears near the road in a pale dress. Others say she waits by the trees, still needing a ride out of the cold. It is a classic vanishing hitchhiker story, but the Smoky Mountain setting gives it roots, smoke, creek noise, and cabin walls. Roaring Fork is beautiful in daylight, with waterfalls and green leaves flashing beside the road. But near dusk, the old homes feel different. A white shape between trunks could be mist, a memory, or only headlights on moving fog. Still, the legend stays because it asks a simple question. If Lucy found her way home once, why does she keep walking the trail? Number 19. Burkittsville Woods. Burkittsville, Maryland, sits at the foot of South Mountain, small enough that the woods seem to lean over the town. English settlement in the area began in the 1700s, and by the 1820s the village was growing, with stores, farms, a schoolhouse, and roads. The Appalachian Trail passes nearby, above a landscape shaped by war, farms, and folklore. On September 14th, 1862, the Battle of Crampton's Gap crashed over the ridge near Burkittsville, part of the larger Battle of South Mountain. Wounded soldiers were brought into the village after the fighting, and old homes became temporary places of care. That real history already gives the woods a heavy feeling without needing any monster at all. Then, in 1999, the Blair Witch Project used Burkittsville as its fictional setting and changed how many people saw the town. The movie's witch story was invented, but visitors still came looking for signs, cemeteries, and dark tree lines. Locals suddenly had to live inside a legend that was never truly theirs, while the real past stayed quieter underneath. That is what makes Burkittsville Woods unsettling. The fear here is layered: Civil War memory, old mountain roads, pop culture myth, and the natural loneliness of a forest after sunset. A hiker does not need to believe in a witch to feel the canopy closing in. Sometimes the scariest thing is a place carrying more stories than one small town ever asked for. Number 20. Big Ridge State Park and Ghost House Trail. Big Ridge State Park, Tennessee, lies in Union County, near Norris Lake, in land shaped by Cherokee history, early settlers, TVA change, and the Civilian Conservation Corps. In the 1930s, workers helped build the park as Norris Dam remade the valley, on ground once tied to Lewiston and nearby farms. Cabins, trails, and a lake turned old mountain ground into a public refuge. One path carries the strongest name, Ghost House Trail. The loop is only about 1.2 miles, but it passes through the memory of families who lived in this area before the 1930s. Hikers see cemetery stones, the remains of a home place, and quiet woods where roots cover what people left behind when communities changed or disappeared. The most repeated story centers on the Hutchison family and a young woman named Mary, said to have died of tuberculosis in the 1840s or 1850s. Some tales say her cries were heard after death. Others speak of a ghost dog panting and running through the brush. There are also stories of figures near graves and a lonely presence moving under the trees. What makes Ghost House Trail work is not terror, but closeness. It is a short walk through a real past, sickness, family grief, old homesteads, and names fading from stone. When the woods go still, the place feels less abandoned than remembered. Number 21. Van Deventer Shelter. Van Deventer Shelter, Tennessee, looks out over Watauga Lake, one of the prettiest views on the Appalachian Trail. The shelter sits high on Iron Mountain, where hikers arrive tired, drop their packs, and watch the water shine far below. By daylight, it feels peaceful enough to make a person forget how lonely the ridge can become after dark. But the shelter carries a real tragedy from April 1975. Thru hiker Janice Balza, only 22 years old, was killed there while walking the trail. The case shook the hiking community because the Appalachian Trail was supposed to feel like a long road of trust. People shared food, stories, matches, and shelter space with strangers, believing the mountains made them safer. Years passed, and the place became part of trail memory. Hikers spoke softly about an unseen presence near the shelter, not as a monster, but as a sadness that stayed behind. Some leave white flowers there as a quiet act of respect. In that simple gesture, the legend changes from fear into remembrance, giving the ridge a softer kind of haunting. That is why Van Deventer is so powerful. The view is beautiful, but beauty does not erase what happened. When evening settles over Watauga Lake and the shelter grows still, hikers understand that every mile of the trail carries human stories. Some are joyful, some are painful, and some remain in the silence, asking only to be remembered with honest respect. Number 22. Sunfish Pond. Sunfish Pond, New Jersey, rests high on Kittatinny Ridge inside Worthington State Forest, close to the Delaware Water Gap. The Appalachian Trail touches its rocky shore, giving hikers a blue surprise after long miles of forest. It looks quiet, but the pond is older than any road, cabin, or trail sign around it. The water was shaped by the Wisconsin Glacier during the last ice age, leaving behind a rare glacial pond about 44 acres wide. In 1970, it was named a National Natural Landmark because of its beauty and delicate plant life. Mountain laurel, hardwood forest, and cold, clean water make the place feel almost untouched, like a window into deep time. That is also why it has strict rules. Swimming is not allowed in the pond, and camping is kept away from the shore to protect the fragile land. To some hikers, that makes Sunfish Pond feel forbidden. It is not closed because of a curse or a monster, but because one careless campfire, soap, or trash bag could damage something thousands of years old. Sunfish Pond asks visitors to look, listen, and then leave it as they found it. At dusk, the water turns dark, the rocks cool underfoot, and the protected shore feels almost sacred. The pond does not need a legend to feel powerful. Its secret is survival, waiting in still water above the valley, under the same sky hikers have followed for generations. Number 23. Point Pleasant and the Mothman. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, sits where the Ohio and Kanawha rivers meet, a river town of bridges, rail lines, and dark bottomland. In November 1966, two young couples reported something strange near the old TNT area outside town. A tall, winged figure with glowing red eyes that seemed to rise from the night and follow their car. The Point Pleasant Register ran the story on November 16, 1966, and the creature soon had a name, Mothman. Reports continued through the next 13 months. Some witnesses described a man-shaped bird. Others spoke of fear, speed, and wings wide enough to block the road. Skeptics offered cranes, owls, shadows, or panic, but the legend kept growing. Then came December 15, 1967. The Silver Bridge, which connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to Gallipolis, Ohio, collapsed during rush hour, killing 46 people. There was never an official connection between the bridge disaster and the sightings, yet timing tied them together in public memory. The Mothman became a warning in many retellings. Today, Point Pleasant lives with both grief and legend. There is a museum, a statue, and a festival. But beneath the fun is a real tragedy that changed families forever. That is why the story still works. Mothman is not only a monster in the sky, he is the shape people gave to fear. Number 24. The White Mountains. The White Mountains of New Hampshire look beautiful from a distance, but the Appalachian Trail does not cross them gently. It climbs into the Presidential Range, where trees shrink, rocks sharpen, and weather can change faster than a hiker can find a jacket. Above tree line, a sunny morning can become a white, roaring wall. Mount Washington is the most famous warning. At 6,288 feet, it is the highest peak in the Northeast, and on April 12, 1934, observers recorded a 231 mile-per-hour wind gust there. For decades, that was the world record for surface wind. Even today, the mountain is known for rapid temperature drops, ice, fog, and hurricane-force gusts. That is why parts of the Whites can feel forbidden, even when the trails are open. The danger is not a locked gate, it is pride. Hikers may start low in warm air, then reach exposed ridges, where clouds erase cairns and wind steals balance. Many rescues and tragedies in the range began with someone underestimating a mountain that looked close on the map. It hides the path and turns every step into a choice. When fog folds around the summit and the world disappears to 10 feet of rock, the legend becomes clear. These mountains do not need ghosts. They have wind enough to make any living person feel small, and silence enough to keep the lesson for every hiker. Number 25. The Snallygaster's Domain. The Snallygaster belongs to the old dark hills around Frederick County, Maryland, and the border country near West Virginia. German settlers began moving into this region in the 1730s, bringing stories, warnings, and old country fears with them. One of those fears became the Schnellergeist, or quick spirit, a name later twisted into Snallygaster. In the earliest stories, it was less like a normal animal and more like a nightmare in the sky. Part bird, part reptile, with a sharp beak, terrible claws, and a cry that carried over farms after dark. Families painted 7-pointed stars on barns and houses, hoping the symbol would keep the creature away from livestock, children, and lonely roads. The legend exploded in 1909 when the Middletown Valley Register printed wild accounts of a one-eyed winged beast terrorizing Frederick County. Those newspaper stories were largely a hoax, built to sell papers and stir fear. But they gave the Snallygaster a second life. During Prohibition, moonshiners were also said to use the monster tale to scare strangers from the hills. That is why the Snallygaster still feels so Appalachian. It is folklore, warning sign, newspaper trick, and mountain mask all at once. Maybe people heard an owl, maybe they heard a hidden still, or maybe, when the barn star fades and the ridge goes black, something old still circles above South Mountain, quick as fear and hard to name. Number 26. Wapiti Shelter and Dismal Falls. Wapiti Shelter, Virginia, sits in the green country near Dismal Creek, where the Appalachian Trail runs through quiet forest and small streams cut between the ridges. Today, the shelter is not the same old structure that gave the name its weight. The earlier Wapiti became tied to one of the darkest real moments in trail history, a story hikers now tell in quiet whispers. In May 1981, two young hikers, Robert Mountford Jr. and Laura Susan Ramsey, both 27, were killed near the old shelter by Randall Lee Smith. They had come from Maine and were walking the trail with hopes bigger than fear. The case shocked hikers because the AT was built on trust. Strangers sharing space, food, water, and stories under one roof. The old shelter was later removed, and a new one stood farther north, but the name never fully escaped the past. A short detour away, Dismal Falls keeps falling over stone, beautiful and cold, with a name that already sounds like a warning. Hikers know the water is lovely, yet the woods around it can feel heavier than ordinary silence there. The fear here is not a made-up monster. It is the memory of what can happen when isolation meets the wrong stranger. At dusk, the creek keeps moving, the shelter darkens, and every hiker understands why respect, caution, and kindness matter so much in places far from help, especially after dark. Number 27, Clarendon Gorge. Clarendon Gorge, Vermont, opens suddenly beneath the Appalachian Trail, where the Mill River cuts through stone and trees lean over the water. A suspension bridge carries hikers across the gorge, giving them a view that feels both beautiful and dangerous. The river looks calm in places, then sharp and fast where the rocks tighten below without warning. This is one of the trail's true look but don't take places. Appalachian Trail rules list Clarendon Gorge as an area where camping is prohibited nearby, and campfires are not allowed in the vicinity. Those rules are not there to ruin the adventure. They protect hikers from steep drops and protect the fragile river corridor from damage. Still, restrictions can make a place feel forbidden. A hiker arrives tired, sees flat ground near water, and understands why earlier travelers might have wanted to stop. But the gorge asks for discipline. You pass through, listen to the river, take the memory, and keep walking. Because staying too long in the wrong spot can turn a peaceful place into trouble fast. The haunting of Clarendon Gorge is the sound of water below the bridge. It does not speak, but it warns. One slip, one fire, one careless night could change the story of a hike forever. When the bridge sways gently and the dark green gorge opens underfoot in the mist, the message is simple. Some wild places are safest when they are admired, then left alone. Number 28, The Priest Mountain. The Priest Mountain rises in Nelson County, Virginia, inside the Priest Wilderness of George Washington National Forest. Its summit stands just over 4,000 feet, and the Appalachian Trail reaches it by a hard climb that makes hikers earn every view. The name alone gives the mountain a strange weight, as if the ridge is waiting to hear something more than footprints. That idea became a trail tradition at Priest Shelter, built near the summit, after a major AT relocation in the 1950s. In the logbook, hikers write confessions to the priest. Some admit they ate extra food, skipped chores, complained too much, or dreamed of quitting. After hundreds of hard miles, those small sins can feel funny, honest, and human. But the region also carries darker memory. In 2011, thru hiker Scott Stonewall Lilly was found dead near the Appalachian Trail in Amherst County, not far from this central Virginia stretch. Authorities treated the case as suspicious, and the unresolved nature of it added a colder note to the wider trail country around these mountains. So the priest feels like two stories at once. One is playful, tired hikers laughing at their own weakness in a shelter notebook. The other is a reminder that even sacred-sounding mountains are still real wilderness. When fog slides across the ridge, the confessions seem less like jokes and more like whispers. Number 29. Cades Cove. Cades Cove, Tennessee, lies inside Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a wide green valley circled by mountains like walls. Long before tourists followed the 11-mile loop road, Cherokee people used this land for hunting and travel. In the early 1820s, European American settlers arrived, clearing fields, building cabins, and making a small world in the cove. Churches soon became part of that world. A Baptist congregation formed in the 1820s, and the primitive Baptist church that visitors see today dates to 1887. Families gathered there for worship, news, funerals, and comfort. The cemetery outside still holds old names, reminding every visitor that Cades Cove was not always scenery. It was home. That is why its ghost stories feel personal. Visitors tell of a woman in white moving near the loop road or close to the old church, pale against the mist. Some say she is tied to pioneer grief, others to forgotten burials or lonely mountain roads. No record proves her story, but the setting makes belief easy when fog settles low across the fields. Cades Cove does not shout its hauntings. It lets them rise slowly from cabins, grave markers, and empty porches. Deer graze where families once worked. Wind moves through church windows. And as evening dims the valley, the woman in white feels less like a scare and more like memory itself, walking one final circle around the home she never really left behind. Number 30. The 100-Mile Wilderness. The 100-Mile Wilderness in Maine is the final great test for many northbound Appalachian trail hikers. It runs between the Monson area and Apple Bridge near Baxter State Park, crossing forests, ponds, roots, bogs, and ridges where help can feel very far away. A famous warning sign tells hikers not to underestimate what waits ahead at all in Maine. This stretch is known as the longest remote section of the entire Appalachian Trail. Traditional hikers enter with days of food because towns, stores, and easy resupply are absent from the route itself. Cell service can vanish, weather can turn cold, and river crossings can become serious after rain. Every pound in the pack begins to matter by the second day. That is why the wilderness feels almost forbidden. Not because a gate bars the way, but because the land demands honesty. A hiker who rushes, wanders off trail, or ignores water and food can learn quickly that Maine does not forgive carelessness. The forest is beautiful, but it is also thick enough to swallow sound, landmarks, and confidence. And yet, that danger is part of its power. The 100-Mile Wilderness gives hikers clear ponds, older forest, moose tracks, and quiet nights under dark skies. It strips the journey down to the simplest truth. Walk carefully, pay attention, and keep going
If you enjoy this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.